Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, July 14th, 2016. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, a stop at Gordon Biersch in Rockville, Maryland, where head brewer Christian Layke has collaborated with Mad Fermentationist Mike Tonsmeire to create a Flemish Red. We'll taste samples from the 4 barrels used to create the beer. If you're new to home brewing or would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. And if you buy any of our DVD combos, you get a free Basic Brewing bottle opener. And don't forget to get a copy of our Brewer's Logbook, where you can use it to log and track up to 50 batches of beer. You can follow me on Twitter. My username is Basic Brewing, all one word. We have a Basic Brewing Radio and Basic Brewing Video page on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing. Thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. Whenever you think of Amazon shopping, think of us first and go to basicbrewing.com. Click on our ad. It'll take you back to Amazon. You can shop to your heart's content. It won't cost you any extra. You'll be helping us to bring you the show, and we greatly appreciate your support. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site. You can find our Basic Brewing iPhone app on iTunes, our Android app on Amazon.com. We have a Windows phone app. We're on the BlackBerry podcast directory, and we're on the Stitcher app as well. We're on Google Play Music, too. If you want to put a tip in our tip jar, some coinage in our guitar case, you can go to basicbrewing.com/support, and thanks to everybody who's done so already. Let's take a look into the mailbag. This is from Grant in Birmingham, Alabama. You may remember Grant from last week's show. I talked with him near the end of the episode on the floor of Club Night about his attempt to brew a 100% rye beer. Well, Grant writes to share of more successful experiences this time. He shares his experience brewing a sour wort Berliner Weiss. And the technique that Grant used to introduce lactobacillus was to steep a pound of unmilled Pilsner malt into his wort. Grant says, after I finished steeping the unmilled Pilsner malt, I removed the bag and thought to myself, it's a shame to waste all this grain. As I took another swallow of the homebrewed Kolsch I'd been drinking throughout the brewing session, it occurred to me that the soaked grain was already on its way to becoming crystal malt. Remembering that you had done a couple of shows on that, I pulled up the video for reference, then commenced making my own crystal malt. So, Grant took the grain that had been steeping in his wort and made crystal malt, or at least as close as we can come without malting our own grain as homebrewers. He made crystal malt using the technique that we talked about on Basic Brewing Radio and Basic Brewing Video. Very smart. I probably would not have thought about that. I would have just tossed the grain into the compost heap, as I've done in the past. But cheers to Grant for not wasting the grain and instead turning it into something fun. The finished product, Grant compared his version to a commercial Crystal 80 and says, flavor-wise, the difference between the two is that the store-bought Crystal 80 tastes like dark caramel or burnt marshmallows, while mine has the distinct flavor of dried cherries. Ooh, I plan to use it in a Belgian double soon. Wow. That sounds great. Thanks, Grant, and update us when you do use the specialty grain or the specialty malt that you made. Whatever you call it, whether it's true, whether you call it crystal or not. Time for a word from our sponsors, Desiree and Dave from High Gravity in Tulsa. Desiree and Dave have invited me to help judge the Fellowship of Oklahoma Ale Makers, or FOAM, Iron Brewer competition this week. I post on Wednesday, so just to be clear, it's the evening of Thursday the 14th in Tulsa at the FOAM meeting. Steve has a jazz concert, so he can't make it, but I'm excited to go. I hope to get some sound for this program at the thing. Not sure where it is, so check with the folks at High Gravity to see where that's going to be. Or if you know somebody who's in foam, you can ask them if you're in the Tulsa area. I'm looking forward to that. My lovely wife, Susan, is going to drive me over there and back. So she does exist. You'll get to see her. I also want to mention that I got an ingredient kit at High Gravity while Steve and I were in Tulsa at High Gravity a couple of weeks ago. I got a Sinister Milk Stout kit based on left-hand milk stout. I got the all-grain kit, unmilled, although you can get it milled, or extract version. I was going to bump my recipe up to the nth degree with an nth ingredient like oak spirals, but I forgot. It was fun to brew with a kit. I haven't done it in a very long time. It was fun to brew with a kit because I didn't have to fret with the recipe myself. I didn't have to second guess myself or try to figure out the recipe myself. It's all done for me. The instructions were clear and it was easy to follow. And my wife Susan and I bottled it a few days ago, and it tasted great going into the bottle. And I brewed it for Susan since she loves that style. So that's something that if you do brew and have a significant other, I advise you do that every now and then. Brew something that they like. You can check out all the great customizable recipe kits that High Gravity offers at highdgravitybrew.com. That's highdgravitybrew.com. This is a really fun show this week. It was the first stop on a tour that Mike Tonsmeire led us on the day before HomebrewCon in Baltimore. Most people that I talked to at the conference were surprised that we stopped at a Gordon Biersch, and I guess the restaurant chain doesn't have a reputation for being adventurous. However, we found evidence to the contrary, and in talking to Christian, it seems like Gordon Biersch is giving more local control to the brewers at the individual restaurants, so that's a good thing. We had a great time sampling from the 4 barrels that the beer was aged in and blending them in the end of the episode. If you want to read more about our session, you can find an article that I wrote about it on beerandwinejournal.com. Also, I read on Christian's Twitter feed that he put the beer on tap about a week ago. Mike Tonsmeire, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
I'm glad to be here. This is my 10th anniversary season with you, James, amazingly.
Oh, wow. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary. A third of my life has now been devoted solely to Basic Brewing Radio.
But it's paying off dividends.
Oh, the checks every month are really appreciated, James. Sending my kids through college.
Just don't cash them. Checks will not be honored. Where are we, and who's our special guest?
Our special guest is Christian Layke of Gordon Biersch, Rockville, and we are at his brewery, the Gordon Biersch in Rockville, Maryland. I picked you guys up in Baltimore earlier today, and we're doing a little tour around the D.C. suburbs and D.C. itself, and for our first stop, I couldn't think of anywhere better than a tasting of a Collaborative Flemish Red that we have, Christian and I have aging here at the brewery.
Awesome. Welcome, Christian.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you guys being here.
And we have some of the usual cast of characters. We have Bob Stimsky in the middle of a sip.
Hello, everyone.
Steve Wilkes.
Hey, everyone.
And Andy Sparks.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Christian, what do we got?
So today we have a Flanders Red that Mike and I brewed back in around January for December, I think late December of last year, and it's been in wine barrels with 3 different sets of microbe combinations. Aging since then, it was briefly assessed about 3 months ago, and here we are at the 6-7 month anniversary to taste it again, see if it's getting ready to bottle up or keg up.
Very exciting. Talk about the recipe.
The sort of Flemish Red is kind of that classic, you want maltiness and you want some crystal malt in there to give you some darker, fruitier flavors. Christian turned me on to DRC Double Roast Crystal. Is that what instead of a Special B, which is a more raisiny? Could you describe the flavor of the Double Roast Crystal?
So the Double Roast Crystal is Simpson's version, more or less, from what I understand, of a Special B malt. So they looked at the original recipe formulations for Special B and made their version of it. My impression, tasting it, is that it is similarly intense in terms of raisin, date, dark fruit character, but it is more sweet, more rounded, a little bit less of an acrid character. When you taste the grains in the mouth, it's not so much how it comes across in the finished beer. I haven't done a side-by-side comparison of that.
And talk about the the percentages and designing the recipe and.
Do you happen to have
I have the recipe sheet. I'll go grab that in 1 second. I know that we went pretty heavy on the crystal malt because we wanted the residual sweetness. And in fact, the beer, I remember, finished quite high from fermentation, 4.9 if I remember correctly, Plato. And I was anxious about that. It doesn't taste like a sweet beer now, though, so it was clearly a good decision to go with a heavy dose of crystal malt.
Yeah, I guess that was my main question, not to get exact percentages or exact recipes, but when you're doing forming a strategy to design a beer like this, it sounds like you need to get something that's heavy tasting in the beginning to give something for the bugs to chomp on and for it to dry out a little bit.
Oh, definitely. And part of this, too, is that we aren't doing sort of the classic Belgian way of aging a beer for a long time and then blending into younger, sweeter beer and pasteurizing. So we really have to build in that oomph and that maltiness and a little residual sweetness. And tasting this first one, it is a dry beer, but it's also not that bone-dry, lambic-like. It doesn't create a desert in your mouth after every sip, that kind of thing.
And we've got 4 samples in front of us, and we pulled the stainless steel nail out and pulled the samples directly from the barrels. What are the barrels?
So we've got 4 barrels with 3 different sets of microbes. The first is from East Coast Labs, if I remember correctly. East Coast yeast that Mike had grown up from some dregs, and then we grew it up again before pitching into the barrel. The second one is from Jasper Akkerblom of Lost Rhino, and he's starting his own company, Bright Yeast Labs. And then the third 2 barrels, or the 2 barrels with the third sample, is from BSI, Brewing Supplies, Brewing Sciences Institute. I had a brain fart there. Brewing Sciences Institute. And it is their Flanders Red mix with Pediococcus added.
And sour brain farts are the best, right, Steve?
What's that saying?
Or maybe you should have.
The barrels were red wine barrels?
Red wine barrels, that's correct.
And this is the first thing that's been in them? Yep, first use.
Okay, so this is the West Coast,
So this is
the
the
first
East
one.
Coast.
East Coast, West Coast. It's early in the morning, and
Especially on the West Coast.
It's definitely acidic, but it's a clean lactic sourness. It doesn't have any vinegar to my taste. I've always liked this strain because it doesn't dry the beer out too much. It has a little leatheriness to it, but it's not a big, funky, it's not blue cheese, it's not barnyard, it's not horse stall or anything like that. It's to me, a very pleasant, approachable kind of sourness.
yeah, it's not aggressive.
Yeah, I say the same thing. And I do get that dark fruit coming through the raisins and dates and even a little brown sugar almost.
definitely.
So I really like that quite a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a delicious beer, nice and clean. When you smell it when we were in the barrel room and you could smell all these things at the same time, you're expecting a big punch, right? But this is really very, very nice, very pretty in your mouth.
My very first taste of it, I thought, "Whoa, my gosh, that's sour." The second taste of it, that went away a little bit.
That palate shock of the first beer of the day.
Yeah, but it didn't just strip the enamel off my teeth afterward. So I really like that about it.
Bob, no pressure.
No pressure. I agree with everyone. No, it was very, very good. I liked the fact that it wasn't aggressive on my palate. Some of the sours, they really put you off right off the bat, and then you're thinking about them. But this was perfect on my level of where the amount of acidity is and everything.
Yeah, I get a bit of the oak as well.
Yeah.
Which brings kind of a tannic character to it.
Yeah, you get a little dryness in the finish from the astringency from the tannins. What I like about it is just how bright it is, and I think that's what everybody else said as well, that it's definitely tart. There's no two ways about it, but it's a pleasant, lingering tartness instead of turning into sour to the point where it's just not enjoyable. It's a very tasty beer.
How were the barrels prepared, going from the wine to this?
So I filled each barrel with essentially boiling water out of my hot liquor tank and let them sit overnight. And then the following morning, I dumped them. Water was still steaming the following morning, and that's all I did to prepare them.
So we shouldn't be getting much of a wine character, I wouldn't think, from this then.
No, I've heard of people preparing liquor barrels in the same way, and I would always worry that you're just stripping out so much of the flavor that you're looking for. But in this case, I really wasn't looking for red wine. I was looking for sour beer. So hopefully a little bit of the red wine character went away, but we're still tasting oak. There's no two ways about that. So I didn't want to strip all that character out.
We've got the band now. We're in the restaurant here at Gordon Biersch, and so you may hear some activity in the background as far as getting ready for the day. So are we?
On to number 2. Or do we want to?
Sure. That's. I'm preserving a little bit of the one.
Well, we have more glasses available.
Some extra glasses that way.
What's that? Yeah, this one looks like it's got some.
Yeah, that's nice. It's I would say it's pleasantly tart. I get more of the tart on the nose than I do on the flavor.
We'll also be coming back at the end and doing a little blend between them and so.
Oh, okay.
Now, with only 4 barrels, we probably won't have a particularly complex blending thing. It will probably be let's see how all 4 of them are together, and then let's go from there.
Yeah. I guess
See if it improves on any of them.
How they end up if there's one that stands out, or maybe it needs to be
Stands out good or stands out for bad.
different for sure.
I think this one may need some time.
Yeah, this is a little eggy on the nose.
Well, I get a little diacetyl too, maybe just a little of that popcorny. It might be more popcorn than buttered popcorn, but I think there's some diacetyl in there.
Mustiness, maybe a little bit of some barnyard or something along those lines.
Yeah, I guess would the eggy be more of a sulfury kind of a thing?
Yeah, that would certainly be a sulfury thing, and that hopefully will blow off with time. That's one of the risks. That's one of those flavors with sour beer that you really do have to get out before it gets packaged, before it goes into kegs, if you want it to go away, because it really needs to. It's not going to be converted into something else. It really needs to be bubbled out. And I've had a couple. Once in a while, I'll have a keg like that, and you can vent the keg, but it takes some extra effort to get something like that versus something like diacetyl that could be cleaned up, could be converted to a less flavorful byproduct by the yeast after packaging.
I was just going to ask if the barrel would allow that process to happen.
It should. And that's even though these barrels have hard bungs on them, barrels tend to breathe a little bit. And that's one of the problems I've found when I've gone to hard bungs in carboys or something like that. Even if fermentation's almost done, if there's a flavor, that some things can be trapped in there, whereas wood will allow those to breathe out if given enough time.
Pot down my level here a little bit.
This one also tastes less tart to me.
Yeah, it's definitely less sour.
I measured the pH when I took these 3 months ago, and this one was by far the least sour of the bunch. Most of the rest were around 3.5 pH, and this one was about 3.8. So it didn't.
I suspect this one's maybe down a little closer to 3.5 now, but the other one's maybe down to 3.4 or 3.
The pH meter we can pull out if we want to take some pH readings.
I get a little maybe raspberry in the finish in this one. As I'm tasting it more, I'm sort of tasting past that sulfur and getting a little more jammy, fruity kind of character, which is really nice.
I kind of picked up a little of that kind of berry thing in the nose. I'm not sure I'm picking up in the flavor, but it's delicious.
Yeah, the sulfury character seems to be dissipating. Either that or I'm getting used to it.
Yeah. The first especially whiff I took of it, I was definitely getting a lot of that barnyard funkiness I think you described as egg. And as it sits in the glass, it seems to be going away very, very rapidly.
Which is probably a good sign, I would say.
Always, but it's always hard to tell, is it going away or are we getting used to it? And that's, it's that classic, you smell vanilla until you can't smell anymore, then you smell something else, and if we went back to the other one, would we then pick it up more now? And these are the tricks with tasting is, how do you keep your palate fresh when you're going back and forth between similar beers?
And we're rinsing with water, so.
It also seems a little thinner to me. Is anybody, the mouthfeel seems a little thinner, is that?
Which might be counterintuitive to what you'd think, right? It seems like, that would be more dry mouthfeel, but it does feel just a little thinner, right?
What do you think, Bob?
Definitely different than the first one.
Yeah.
But you've been somewhat critical on it, but it tastes as good as any sour I've ever had. So I've not got no complaints.
Well, I'm not being critical. I'm just making observations. Yeah. I mean, it's just
one thing I did notice is it seems like this one has less of the tannin astringency that we picked up in the first one. The finish doesn't dry out quite as much as the other one did.
A little leaner through the middle, maybe, and then it doesn't have that fall off a cliff that the other one had.
Yeah, I'm getting more of a kind of a sweetness on the back end now that it's that I've tasted it for a couple of times. It's interesting how the same beer changes.
It just blows me away and I find this everywhere. I mean, you brew, even at home, you brew something and you doctor it a little bit differently, and it should be the same beer, but it's not.
And even the same beer in the glass, that I tasted just 30 seconds ago or 60 seconds ago, tastes different.
I think that's really one of the key things to know about sour beers is, sure, we can talk about the recipe, but I try not to get too bogged down in, is it 7% this or 9% that? You really are setting up the microbes to go in the right direction, and it really is more about the right microbes, having the right conditions, the right barrels. All of that is so much more important in sour beers than the very minutia of the recipe.
How difficult is it? So as a commercial brewer, wanting some sense of consistency in the beer, it seems to me like you'd have the challenges in doing sour beers commercially be much greater than, say, just doing Kolsch's and, Hefeweizens.
And that's one of the nice things about this is really sort of a one-off experiment. And so whatever this, we can make the best beer that we can and blend the best beer that we can without having to worry too much about how it tasted last year or how it will taste next year.
I think that's right. It depends on what your expectations are for your sour beer program. If you're Rodenbach trying to make a beer that's going to taste the same every single time, I can imagine this would be extraordinarily challenging because you don't just have the recipe and the yeast to deal with, you also then have all of the microbes that are going to act in different ways, different times of the year, different seasons. If you're a brewer that has a sour program where you're willing to have it be different from year to year, well, then maybe the stress is actually a little bit less than whether or not your Hefeweizen, which is actually kind of a tricky yeast to manage in itself, is going to taste the same from batch to batch. So it really, I think, depends on your customers' expectations, your expectations for your own sour beer program, which here, I mean, is very nascent and pretty much just it's a sideline hobby for us here.
Well, we'll talk about the bit of your background and the beers that you brew here.
All right. My background, I came out of the homebrewing community. I transitioned from my former job as working at a think tank, environmental nonprofit think tank, to brewing commercially about 8 years ago. I started volunteering with the brewer down at the Chop House, District Chop House downtown, and he taught me a ton, Barrett. And then I was able to land a job as a assistant brewer with Gordon Biersch with Barrett's help. And after doing that for about 18 months, they offered me the position of head brewer here in Rockville. That was about 6 years ago. So I've been having a great time, just learning a ton every year.
So talk about your lineup. I mean, what are the standard beers, and how far have you been able to go outside the line, so to speak?
Well, Gordon Biersch has changed a lot in the last, ever since I got here, we've been changing consistently from being willing to allow us to push the envelope more than we had in the past to now full on, you need to be pushing the envelope as a brewer. We have to have our export and our Märzen on at all times. And then we have to have one additional legacy beer on tap at all times. But that can be any of the beers. So you can have the Hefeweizen, you can have the Czech Pilsner, you can have the Blondbach, you can have the Sommerbrau Kolsch. Any of them, whichever it is, it counts as the third. After that, we can have our own recipes on. So we have to submit our recipes and get them approved. But they have so far only not allowed me to brew one beer I wanted to brew. Well, maybe that's the second. So I wanted to brew a classic American Pilsner, and I wanted to brew an American style wheat. And those were the two they said, we'd rather you think about something else. So they've been really very accommodating and very encouraging ever since I started trying to brew American IPAs and then other beers. So right now I oftentimes have 12 or 13 beers on tap, and only usually 4 of them are our company recipes, because when I tried taking Hefeweizen and Chekhov, I had a revolt on my hands. My regulars were not willing to see that happen. So I have 4 of the legacy Gordon Biersch beers at all time, but then I oftentimes have 8 or 9 of my own recipes, and the company really encourages that and wants it to happen. So when you go to Gordon Biersch these days, any Gordon Biersch across the country, you'll find that the brewer has more of their own recipes on tap than the legacy company beers.
And is that partly about consumer demand too? Are consumers always just sort of looking for something new? On the way over here, we were just talking about so many breweries. It seems like every month have a new beer because there's so many consumers who just go, "What's new? What? I'm looking to try something I haven't before."
Yeah, I think that's really at the heart of it. That the craft beer movement has just accelerated so quickly in the last few years that people who want to experience craft beer want to oftentimes experience a new beer, and so we're just trying to meet that demand.
Well, that's awesome that you have that flexibility, and it makes each location kind of different, and it encourages people to go within the chain even. So that's good.
It allows you to suit the local. If the local area is particularly fond of IPAs or whatever it is, you can tailor the beers you're making to what people want, rather than saying, "Hey, everyone has to have this beer at this time of the year."
And we have a much wider range of beers now than we used to. We used to be known for our German-style lagers and Hefeweizen, and now we're known for having a lot of other kinds of beers in addition to that. So we've got Belgians now, we have American IPAs now, and it makes a wider range of beer drinkers happy when they come here. That's our goal.
Do you want to talk about your future plans?
Future plans are uncertain. I am hoping to open my own brewery in the next year or so. So I've been working on a business plan, and I have told Gordon Biersch that I am sad, but I am going to be leaving, so I have enough time to focus my energies on making that happen. So yeah, hopefully you'll be hearing more about me from me about that soon.
Well, best of luck. For Layke Brewing or whatever it turns out to be.
Name is uncertain. I had a name in mind, but my trademark lawyer tells me I can't use it. So
that's got to be more. It's got to be.
Amazingly, Budweiser was taken. Who knew?
and America.
Do we want to talk about the third?
Yeah. So remind us what the second one was.
The second one was from Bright Yeast. Is
Bright Yeast Labs? Yeah.
Originally, he was calling it Jasper Yeast. Was maybe that was sort of a behind the scenes.
Bright Yeast Labs may still be in process. It may be being formulated in these last and coming few months. I know that he and a partner are working on putting that together. So, but they're wearing hats that say Bright Yeast Labs on it. So I'm hoping that I'm not outing them before they're ready to be outed. So.
Okay, I think I need a tiny rinse, please, sir. And while I'm sipping, you can talk about the third again.
The third one is from BSI, and they are exclusively for commercial brewers, essentially. I've had a couple of friends as home brewers who've even attempted to order 1 or 2 barrel pitches from them, and usually they demur and say, "Oh, we've got enough business," and they really focus on the commercial end of things. They tend to be very quick, and their prices are very reasonable, and a lot of commercial brewers use them. And so this is essentially their version of the Rosalaire blend. I think they may spell it slightly differently than Yeast does, but the same idea, a blend of microbes intended for Flemish Reds, Flemish Browns, that doesn't usually have Pediococcus, and this one you requested to have Pediococcus. They're also very good at custom blends. They are very willing to say, "Oh, you can get this without the Saccharomyces, or you can get this with extra this, or we'll blend these 2 strains for you at no extra cost," or whatever it may be.
Brian and David there are extremely helpful. So anytime you're working on a project like this, they will have conversations with you, letting you know what they would recommend, what the influence of different decisions might be. And they recommended that PDO would increase the sour aspect of the beer in a much more rapid fashion than going without it. They said, it's not part of the traditional mix, but they have found really good results when people do add it. And just to step back one step in the process, the fermentation, the primary fermentation of this beer was done with the Saccharomyces portion of the Rosalaire strain. without the microbes. So we kept the initial, the primary fermentation clean, but it was with the yeast that's in with the Roselaire blend.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if we talked about primary fermentation or not.
Which yeast is that? If I was going to select for that, do we know?
Do you remember what it was called?
I can tell you what they call it in the BSI catalog. I'd have to go look it up, but I can tell you that.
I was wondering if, a lot of times, White Labs or whatever will do blends, and you'll know, well, that's their Kolsch ale yeast in that blend, and I didn't know whether maybe we knew that it's their German ale or something like that.
It's a Belgian strain, I think, right?
Yeah, it's a Belgian strain, absolutely. But I don't know that there is an equivalent to it, just because it was taken out of that blend, so I don't know if it's consistent with any other commercial blends that are out there or commercial strains that are out there.
Well, then that begs the question, Mike. If we were going to do this at home, what would you pick from the ones we can acquire?
Was that the sour pitch, or was that the?
Oh, that was a sour pitch.
Okay, that's the sour pitch. I had a picture of the label from the. For something like this, I would not go with a very aggressive Belgian strain. I think a Belgian strain is fine, but I would keep the fermentation temperature relatively cool. I tend to use the Westmalle strain, the 3787 from Y Yeast or 530 from White Labs. Is sort of my go-to for Belgian strains. Ferment a little bit cool, don't get too much banana, although Brett will clean that up. Honestly, I think the primary fermentation is not the most important thing you have to worry about. New Belgium uses lager yeast falafely. I mean, if they can get away with lager yeast and other breweries can get away with Belgian yeast, it really is about tailoring the wort to that. So if you're using a really attenuative strain, you're going to have to try even harder, mash it even in the low 160s to make sure it doesn't dry out too much before the bugs get introduced. And that's just sort of the general rule is, don't go crazy with the primary fermentation. There are great sour beers made with Scottish yeast and Kolsch yeast and Belgian yeast, and it's just all about figuring out what works for you and for the microbes, and that's where these repetitive brews and tastings come in.
And I don't think I have number 3 yet, so please, sir. Please, sir, I want some more. Thank you.
This one's good. It's relatively mild, I would say. It doesn't have the sort of the big flavors of the first two. Good sourness, again, nice, clean, lactic, tangy.
Yeah, you say lactic. Does that mean like a yogurty or?
Yeah, exactly. That tangy. It's not harsh. It's acetic acid tends to hit me on the back of the throat and really sort of grates. This is side of the tongue, old tongue coating. Lactic can get sharper as you get more and more and more of it, but this one also I think is maybe missing some of the weightiness of the first one.
Yeah, this is kind of a more. Maybe it's because I haven't been sipping beers, but this one is pretty tart to me, to my palate.
This one to me tastes like it's the most tart by far so far. Yeah,
it's a bright.
Barnyard, the mustiness, the complexity that the first one had, whereas it's got more in the way of sort of bright cherry kind of tartness to it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Bob, I'll let you go first.
Oh, well, I felt that one right away. And my jowls kind of vibrated, and I felt it in the back of the throat. And I was very happy with it because I thought it was a little more aggressive, not too aggressive, but I liked it. I like it quite bad.
And particularly as the third beer, we've already gotten our palates a little more accustomed to the acid, so this one may even be a little more sour than it's tasting to us now. But so far, it's a nice illustration of how much the yeast can change, how much the microbes can change the beer.
Yeah.
It's the bright cherries, and then you kind of chew on your baseball glove a little bit. So I kind of get that leather. I get some leather and the cherries, and it's very bright. The tartness is bright.
I'm liking this one a lot.
Yeah, it's delicious.
And it'll be really interesting to see the fourth one because that's the same microbes essentially, just in a different barrel. So they may be very, very similar, or they may have a real wide difference between them. Interesting.
Again, I'm getting a little bit the sulfury thing from this one, just a little.
One thing that is interesting is that I have the notes as to which one, but when I assessed them 3 months ago, 2 of the barrels had a full pedicle on top, and 2 of the barrels had barely a wisp of anything. So I don't know, as we are talking here, two of them we're saying are a little bit less aggressively sour, a little bit more of a sulfury. So I'm wondering if that potentially has to do with whether they had developed much of a pellicle or not. Just one thought.
Yeah. Be interesting.
Yeah, no, it's certainly not an identical beer to the other one. I would say it's closest to the third one, but a little of that second one melded in, and honestly a little of the maybe more substantive, malty of the first one.
I like this one the best, really. I mean, I did get a little bit of the sulfur, just a teeny bit of sulfur on the nose, but the flavor to me is more kind of full and complex, and the tartness is not as aggressive as the previous one, which was fermented with treated with the same bugs. But I would say that's my favorite so far.
And honestly, this is again a great illustration of why I don't think homebrewers are best served with having one 60-gallon barrel. If you have one 60-gallon barrel, you don't have the options. You don't get to try out a whole bunch of different microbes and see what works. Honestly, I have a couple 60-gallon barrels, and one of them now is mostly emptied, and the other one's gone really acidic. And I'm so much happier with having 10 carboys that each have different microbes, maybe slightly tweaked base beers, just having all those options that you can go, this one's a little more sour, this one's a little less sour, and hey, maybe I can blend them together, maybe this one would be better with fruit. It really opens up options that as a commercial brewer you can have with barrels. Even a small sour program like this with 4 barrels, hey, that's 4 different trials.
Right, it's fun. I mean, these are different tasting beers. They really are. And, even the two that had the same exact microbes going in, these are quite different flavors that are coming out. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when we blend them.
Yeah, I think I'm getting more of the oaky kind of tannin stuff with number 3 than number 4. Number 4 is more full body. Maybe that's what's kind of hiding that.
And it could also be it's not necessary that all 4 of these barrels had the exact same wines at the exact same times or exactly as many turns. It could be that one maybe was only used twice and one was used 4 times. And
Good point.
I got nothing.
On the number 4?
Well, I was trying to follow up on what Michael was saying, and it drove my thoughts. I like this beer a lot. I kind of agree with you. It seems to be an amalgamation of all of the previous 3, and beyond that, I don't have anything else.
Yeah, this one had a little more of that funky smell when I first got to it. Right, that reminded me of that character that it's custom for that style of beer. Yeah, this one's nice, and it has a nice full body to it. That the other couple before it were a little thin.
Yeah,
it's very drinkable.
I agree with the consensus.
I'd just carbonate this right on up and just send some home with me.
Yeah, I'd actually be very happy drinking this on its own.
You could spend an hour and a half filling a growler from that nail. No, that one came out not too bad, right? Some of the nails were a little more dribbly than we had hoped.
This one is tart as the other ones.
It certainly is acidic, but I don't know if it's.
Could it use maybe just a touch of the more sour one, just to pick that up like a little lemon juice?
Yeah.
Well, as a matter of fact, I have
It'd be interesting to see
a
what
teeny
happens
bit
when you
of.
measure it. It may be just as tart when you measure it, but it's actually not perceived as tart when I drink it.
And that might be part of the fact that body will give you that effect that you think it's more sweet.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
I can't pour beers and point the mic at the same time.
Multitasking is hard.
Yeah, that's right. I blended some of the number 3 with the number 4, and I like it. I think it brightens it up a little bit. Steve's giggling already.
Well, I was just thinking of a Green Acres joke about putting a number 7 and a number 3 together, and then the washing machine would work.
That's right. You'd blow a fuse.
Yeah.
Do we need to pull a little more of that one to do a blend, or do we want to just blend equal amounts of this and because 4 times that may be enough to.
Right, we could do that. Yeah.
3, the one that was really slow on the bottom.
Yeah, but there's exactly an ounce left, so that would actually. Let me go get another.
A graduated cylinder or something like that.
Run a rinse.
Okay, Christian has we paused for a second for Christian to get the graduated cylinder. He's measured equal parts of all 4 into the cylinder, and now he's pouring them around. This is kind of a dark. How would you describe the color? Dark,
leathery, certainly reddish, but it's not a bright red color. But honestly, the Flemish Reds and Flemish Browns are a bit of artificial difference. A lot of people claim Michael Jackson came up with the sort of they're Flemish Reds, and they're aged in wood, and there's Oud Bruins, and they're aged in steel, and this is a little more this, a little more that, and really it's there's a big mass of red and brown tart beers, and he sort of drew a line somewhere towards the middle of it. And so this is a beer that is, we're not taking Rodenbach's exact recipe or anything like that. We're just going in that reddish brown direction.
Pretty good beer.
Yeah. And so this is just, it's often when you're blending, the easiest thing to start with is equal parts of everything. This is what would happen if we just pumped all 4 barrels together. And then, hey, maybe we, if we want, we could see how taking one of the components out would be, or how reducing one to 50% and going from there.
What?
I'd be curious to know how you go about deciding when it's done. Because you could, with 4 variables, you could blend till the cows come home. When do you decide this is what I want? How do you arrive at that as a commercial brewer?
Honestly, I think most commercial brewers take pretty simple directions on things. A lot of home brewers worry about 3.5 versus 3% of a malt. Most commercial brewers go, well, if it's a half sack or a whole sack, that's about, maybe for a dark roasted malt, you're going to deal with, particularly on a smaller system, with something else. Most commercial brewers aren't going to deal with it if it's 23% and 22% and 28%. It's going to be 25, 25, 25, or it's going to be 12.5, or you're going to work in relatively bigger chunks out of ease, because otherwise you're dumping beer. You have to have something to do with that beer.
But is your question? My question that I got from that was when do you know it's ready to blend, or
right.
when it's actually finished in the barrel?
We've experimented with the blendings until what point?
With something like this, we have a little bit of an artificial constraint. Christian's going to be leaving soon, so if honestly, these beers are tasting pretty ready, and there's no reason to wait until the new brewer takes over and then try to work with him to figure, this is a project we started, and we might as well finish it while he's still here.
Obviously, if the beers weren't ready, then that wouldn't be the case, because until the beer is ready, you're not going to serve it. So the question was, are these beers ready to serve? And I think my impression, based on today's tasting, is that they're plenty tart. They have a lot of complexity. They're bright and have the cherry notes that I was really hoping for. I don't know that this would improve with any more time. In fact, I would worry potentially that it could start going acetic, or that it could go from pleasantly funky to extraordinarily funky. This would be a beer I'd be very happy sitting down and drinking for an evening. So that's kind of when I feel like it's ready. Is this beer something that I feel like I and many other fans of sour beer would be really happy to sit down with for an evening? Well, in that case, it's ready.
Yeah, just the equal parts is really delicious. I mean, it's got a brightness, it's got some fruity flavors, it's got sufficient body, it's got the leathery characteristic that you were talking about earlier.
This has actually brought out more cherry, I think, than I got in any of the individual base beers. Together, it's got more of that tart cherry, sour pie cherry.
As well. I feel like it's got more of that leather tobacco character, which I really like. I feel like it adds some complexity and character that I didn't quite get out of any of the beers by itself.
I think a 50-50 blend is perfect. It really is.
What Bob said. This is just absolutely delicious, and carbonate this up and serve it. Andy?
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I'm ready to drink a glass of it. And cold and carbonated would be delicious.
What is carbonation going to bring to the beer?
Carbonation will certainly bring out the aromatics a little bit more. As the CO2 comes out of solution, it will bring with it aromatics. That's, for example, the big reason that we tend to dry hop a beer after fermentation is mostly done, because you smell that great hoppy aroma. Well, that's the CO2 pulling hop aromatics out of your beer into the air. Mm-hmm. And the same way when you carbonate a beer, it'll do that, but in a more beneficial way. It'll pull those aromatics up out of the beer into your nose. It'll also increase the perception of acidity, and it will change the mouthfeel a bit as well.
Add a bit of bitterness as well.
Certainly. And a beer like this will probably be forced carbonating in kegs, and so it's not going to get some of the characteristics you get from the re-fermentation. Brett tends to come out more as you bottle condition or if you keg condition. But for a beer like this, you don't want a huge, big, funky nose to it. And so honestly, forced carbonation is probably the ideal, even if the bottle carboning was an option.
Yeah, this is absolutely delicious. I mean, Almost worth a trip back up when it's done.
We'll send you a bottle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll hold you to that.
All right. Very good.
This was a lot of fun, and I just want to sit here and enjoy the rest of this class. Any final words? Any final pieces of advice to homebrewers out there on this brewing this style or this method of creating a beer?
Well, I think all I would say is just don't be afraid of it. Just embrace it, and if it's not exactly what you want, try again. I think I was intimidated for a very long time about the idea of introducing bugs into my brewery, and then I became comfortable with the idea that, vinyl line is cheap. If you need to replace it, replace it. But you can just have some really unexpected and fun things happen by letting these microbes, in addition to yeast, do things in your brewery. So it's a lot of fun, and just go for it.
Thank you, Christian. And
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. This is the first stop.
First stop of
So
many.
This is going to be hard to top. This is this is a lot of fun and really good.
Yeah. Thanks for having us on as always.
And thanks, guys.
Thank you, James.
The tasting panel.
Well, that was a lot of fun. Once again, check out the article that I wrote on beerandwinejournal.com and look for the beer on tap at the Gordon Biersch Rockville location. Hopefully they still have some there after it being on tap for a week. If you get to try it, let me know what you think. I'm very interested in the final product. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form at basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our support link where you can throw a couple of bucks into the tip jar by subscribing financially to our podcasts. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All-Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our site. You get a free Basic Brewing bottle opener with any DVD combo, and you can check out our Basic Brewing shirts in the store as well. You can find our logbooks where you can track and log up to 50 batches of beer. I recently filled one of those up. It's very handy because there's a table of contents in the front that you can fill out. So now I can find all of those 50 batches very easily. Check out all of our stuff at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We greatly appreciate the support there. Featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Dragons Love Tacos. I do too. And Michael Jackson's Complete Guide to Single Malt Scotch, 7th edition. I like some of that as well. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We greatly appreciate your support. Don't forget, you can also join the American Homebrewers Association and subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through the associate links on basicbrewing.com as well. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.